Hi everyone! Sometimes I get to do my intros after I've actually done my painting, which is really cool because I can actually hold up the painting we're about to do for you. How cool is this? Yeah, we're going to do this lovely little glass terrarium. I'm calling it a terrarium, but I know that a lot of terrariums are sealed on the top. So maybe this is just a lovely pot of succulents. Whatever you want to call it, why don't we paint it? So grab your paints and let's get started. So we're going to begin with our glass terrarium shape, and this is always my least favourite bit because I draw one side really nicely and then I draw the other side with many sketchy lines. And yeah, think how on earth after all these years am I still finding this difficult? But I think it's how we're made, isn't it? So I've got a nice sort of rounded bottomed shape, and then at the top I'm just going to create a little ellipse like that. Might make it a little bit more generous. Like that, and then we're going to fill it. So I'm doing a little open glass one. So I'll do a little sort of rough marker of where things are going to go. We're going to have some soil up to here, then we might have a few stones and pebbles, maybe just a few might have sort of dropped down. We'll have a few pebbles, I think, in the earth. And then we're going to have some lovely succulents. So succulents that I have got knocking around the house at the moment. We'll do some nice, I mean, I call everything an aloe vera, but it's definitely not. It's not remotely. But for a good succulent, you want to start at a base and then make sure that just all your leaves from the succulent just always anchor themselves from the middle. Does that sound familiar? Like we're doing flowers at the same time? We'll do one coming up from the side here, just a slightly more rounded one. What I love about painting succulents is the sort of texture you get with them. I think we'll have one sort of just creeping out a little bit. So we'll have a nice sort of broad stalk with some lovely, I always think of them a bit like stegosaurus sort of spikes. Lovely. And then maybe just a few little sort of longer, thinner tendrilled ones in the background there. And then what we're going to be able to do is have the effect of the glass reflection coming out on top. So we're going to begin by painting in some nice layers of soil. So I've got burnt sienna, which will just be a really nice starting point, a bit of Payne's grey to get it really nice and dark, and then we'll just get some of that richer burnt sienna back in. And I'm going to paint with my size 2 brush. I want to have the control of the space. So first things first, remember because it's in a glass container, we want to leave a little bit of an area around the edge. We'll be doing some interesting things with glazes later on as the glass when we do glass effects over the top. But I'm also just being really sparing with my colour here. And then if I get a bit more brown in that mix, here we go. Just sort of leaving a few little unpainted gaps and allowing it. I also did draw some in, so we'll leave those as well. Imagine the soil is sort of wet to a point, and then it comes down and is just dried out towards the bottom. That's what I've chosen to do with it. So you might be wondering why I'm painting a succulent, not a succulent, a terrarium. And this is, I mean, some people would argue this is not a terrarium. This is one that has an open lid, open sides. I have a terrarium which is very much sealed shut at home. But I sort of thought it would be more fun to paint one where there is a little thing sort of poking up in the top. Well, it was because one of my patrons asked me to do it, and that is how you can get just that little bit more ownership over the content that happens on the channel. Patrons of all tiers, so right down at the Forget-Me-Not tier, which is just £2 a month, you can have your say. And I have a lot of patrons and they have a lot of suggestions, and obviously I can't do everyone that comes in, but I do try and make sure I get round as many people as possible. Oh, I really like that. I'm really happy with that. I might just bring it up at the sides a fraction. Like I said, just a fraction is absolutely fine. Whilst I wait for that to dry, I'm going to wake up some of the greens in my palette, but also the turquoise as well, and a bit of buff titanium, because buff titanium's got a lovely creamy feel, and I think it'll be really useful, especially for some of those sort of almost like frosted effect succulents that you get. You know, they've got such a soft muted exterior that we're not going to see any sort of bounce and shine off some of them. So let's have a go at this one here. I'm going to paint each section separately. Just paint around the outside, clean my brush off a little bit, and then just draw that colour in like that. If I want to, I could get a little bit of this sort of shadowy mix here and maybe just bring it a little bit down towards the bottom. Now I really want my succulents to be nice and crisp and defined, so I won't be painting any of those other ones until that first one is dried. I'm going to get a little bit of green gold here and paint in, just mix that into my main succulent mix. I'm now painting these with a size 0 brush, and that is just going to take a little bit of shadow too. And that's how we're going to do this. We're going to paint one, let it go, let it dry, paint another. Now these ones at the back, the ones I have in my house have a little sort of stripe on them, a little white stripe. If you're a succulent expert and you know which ones I'm painting, I'd love to know. So I'm just leaving a little bit of unpainted space, and you can see how I'm just curving that unpainted space a fraction to give it a slightly rounded look. So as I was painting this, I just suddenly remembered that actually I've got a succulent that this one here, but it's actually got this incredible sort of extra flowering growth at the moment, so I'm going to pop that in as well. So an extra little branch, and then it's a bit like a freesia actually, the way it sort of has curled over. I just put an extra curve, and it's going to come over the front of the glass. And before I go any further with the green, I'm going to get some Pyrrole orange and place in some incredible petals that I've got on this little plant at the moment. So just with the 2/10 brush, some little spiky petals. And as they get closer towards the main stem, they're going to close up a bit, and I'm only going to see a little bit of them. Okay, so I'm going to take a bit of opera rose as well and just add a sweep of that in. And then we can continue. But you can see it's looking really fun. The plants are looking like lovely colours. Really, really happy with them all. And whilst I wait for those last little bits to dry, we can do the stones. So if I just really water down this burnt sienna and Payne's grey, I can use this colour, oops, to just define some of the stones. I feel like I want a slightly more blue tone, so I might get a bit of cobalt blue deep. That might be a bit too blue. You work it out as you go along. But what's quite fun is now you can sort of connect up the unpainted space, the negative space, with the plants and the soil there, just by creating a sort of texture on the little pebbles. And don't forget about the outer edge needing a bit of a gap between where the pebble ends and the glass begins. Okay, let's get these flowers finished. So I've got my 4/10 brush, my smallest one. I'm going to start first at the top, just creating sepals. And a little bit of deep sap green just at the base there. And the sepals are going to get just a little bit less and less. As the flower blooms. And then once that's dry, you can just add a few extra low lights. And then we will be ready to put our glass in and we'll be done. Right, it's time to do the glass, and it's really important that your painting is dry at this point. And the other thing is we need the pencil outline, but you could always just do a little rub out of the pencil lines on the inside just of your succulents and things, because it makes it a lot easier for you to rub out and get rid of that pencil afterwards. Okay, so I've got Moon Glow, interesting colour, Moon Glow. It's like purpley aubergine colour. And I've got Payne's Grey, which is a good old classic colour. I just thought it might be fun to try a different colour, really. And what we're going to do is we're going to glaze layers. So I'm going to begin, I've got a size 4 brush, I think that'll work well. And I'm going to sort of paint a glaze down this shape, and I'm going to try and sort of keep I wanted to do like a fairly straight line there, but now I'm going to leave a little bit of unpainted space I'm just going to go round, painting in. I might sort of add a little bit if I've run out of steam. Just imagining that rounded shape. And then you could leave quite a big gap if you wanted. The key thing is to try and paint over your succulents quite quickly with not too many brush strokes. So it might be good to get a larger brush. But the tricky thing is you just sort of want to be cautious as well. Now I have got this flower which is actually over the front of the glass, so I'm going to just take a little size 0 brush, just paint around the edge there. Oh, I put in a little bit of yellow, hence why there's a bit of a bleed there. And then I'm going to just continue that on down the glass. And now that little gap that we left around the edge, we can actually do something about. So I'm going to come back in with some Payne's grey. This is still a bit wet, so it's not, I'm not glazing up layers on top of the glass layers just yet. I'm still building that first glass layer. But I'm using the Payne's grey as an extra sort of depth of shadow on the moon glow. And it might just look a bit stripy at this point, but we've got to try and build up the layers in a not too uniform manner. I mean, I don't have the real thing in front of me, I'm sort of doing this from my imagination. Sometimes painting glass, it is much easier to have the real thing in front of you. This is looking good. Okay, so I'm going to let that dry. Whilst it's drying, I can look at the rim of the glass. So I'll just take a bit more of a concentrated moon glow, and with a very small sort of 2/10 brush, I'm going to paint along the oval, obviously behind that one, but I've left that tiny bit of unpainted space underneath, which is really going to help me sort of convey the sense that this is a glass. And then in the background, I'm going to just be a little loose. A little bit painterly with it, because I'm not a photorealistic artist by any stretch. So I'm really pleased with that. I'm just going to give it a dry and then just do another glaze over the top. I must be quite sad, but I find adding glazing quite thrilling because it's just a really amazing way of building up a piece. So I've added a bit more concentration to both the Moon Glow and Payne's Grey, and I'm going to take a smaller brush, size 2 brush. In fact, I might add even more concentration to it. It's still translucent. I like that. I might add even stronger. Yeah, it's funny, you sort of add it and then you think, oh, I need it a bit stronger than that. I'm going to add a bit for like a strong bit around the edge. Now we're talking. Takes a bit of courage to do glass. Especially around the bottom, you always find really sort of heavy, dark bits around the bottom. And some around the top as well. And the trouble is I'm sort of making it up as I go along. I'm just trying to be a bit logical with it and think about where these stripes of colour might come. Okay, we're going to do, I've got a big brush here. I wonder if anyone gasped audibly at that moment. Because it's going to dry lighter, you see. And then I'm going to do one just out of the way of the plant over the top, but I will quickly get my little brush in there. Just smooth that down, and then what I really want to do is get quite a deep sweep of a glaze coming up the side here. And I think these things work best when you're a little bit brave. I think that looks cool. So we're going to let that dry, and then the last thing I'm going to do is just tidy up around the bottom. Let's tidy it around the side as well. So we'll let it dry 100%, rub out the pencil, and then tidy up the bottom, and we'll be good. And there you have a rather lovely succulent, or terrariums in a glass, no, succulents in a glass / terrarium. I will just do a tiny bit of shadow. You always find with a glass thing, shadow's never quite sort of what you're expecting it to be. So I like to just do a sort of rather strange sort of light reflection thing going on. But there you go, and we have lots and lots more plants and foliage tutorials, but if you really want to do things with a bit more detail like this glass and learn a bit more about that, then come and find out more about my Patreon in the episode notes below. We paint in more detail, we spend more time on topics. It's a lovely luxury that we can have there, which I just don't have here because we have to move on to the next tutorial each time. But thank you so much for watching. Don't forget, find me at my new Instagram at Harriet_de_Winton, which spells out Harriet de Winton. I can't wait to see you there and enjoy a bit more watercolour inspiration. Thanks so much for watching. Bye!